What's up, YouTube? I am the Vanilla Nerd, and today I get to review the start of the MCU itself, Iron Man 1. And boy, oh boy, am I glad that I got to watch this movie. I just watched Avengers 1, as you know, and I've been going back through Phase 1, so today was Iron Man 1, and that is fantastic. I love this movie, and I can't wait to review it here for you today. But before we jump into it, I just want to give my quick spoiler warning. I will be spoiling all of this movie, so if you haven't seen it, you're 15 years too late. Get on it, go watch it. It's a great film. You'll have a blast. I don't intend on spoiling any other movies, but if I do, I'll give you a quick spoiler warning there as well. But working back to the main movie, there's a lot to love about Iron Man 1. I think one of my favorite things is just how well put together the film is. It's paced well, it has good action that's shot well, and you can tell what's going on. It focuses on its four main characters really well without much deviation. It has heart when it needs to have heart. It has humor when it needs to have humor. It's a really good, well-rounded film. Better so than a lot of films, because a lot of superhero films, I feel like these days, do really well in one area, but not in the rest, and then the movie suffers. But this movie was just all around really, really good. Starting off with character, as I like to do, let's begin with the side characters, starting with Pepper Potts. And I love Pepper. I think she is really cool in this film, and I think that's in large part because she is a character first and a love interest second. I mean, in this movie, she really only shares two-ish romantic scenes with Iron Man, and more often than not, she's his friend. In reality, she's his Watson. She's not overwhelmed by his fame, intellect, or charm. She cuts through those boundaries and sees him for who he really is, a good guy at heart. But she also isn't afraid to call him out on his mistakes and eccentricness and just his flamboyancy and whatnot. She's not afraid to do that, and I think that's really cool. On top of all that, I think it's awesome that she proactively tried to arrest Obadiah, and she helped Tony defeat Obadiah by overloading the arc reactor. I think that's just a really fun, cool character that works really well on screen. The next character I want to talk about is Rhodey, and I love Rhodey. I think he works so well in this film because he's another really good friend of Tony, someone Tony can be himself around and isn't overwhelmed, just like Pepper, by the fame or intellect or anything. And his friendship with Tony is very real and very genuine. They get on each other's nerves in the way that only best friends can get on each other's nerves, and I think that's awesome, and it just endears us, the audience, to Rhodey so much better and so well. One of my favorite scenes with Rhodey is when it cuts to him at the press conference saying, an unfortunate training exercise happened, and it's funny. It brings a smile to my face even to this day. Next character I want to talk about is our main villain, Obadiah Stane, and I love him. I think it's another character this movie knocked out of the park, albeit that his character is not very inspired. He pretty much just wants money and power and likes to be on the cutting edge of technology like a dozen other evil, bald CEOs and villains and stuff. The reason, though, that I think he works well for this movie is, one, he is brilliantly acted by Jeff Bridges, Tron himself, but two, because he works great as a juxtaposition to Tony. Tony does not need money, fame, or power. He likes that, he enjoys it, but he doesn't need it. Obadiah needs it. He craves it. And seeing the opposites, these two opposites, Obadiah Stane and Tony Stark, working against each other works really well and pits Tony against a true nemesis, a true villain and stuff. More than that, though, I think Obadiah Stane works well because he is first a friend to Tony. There is a real friendship between these two. It's not something fake. It's not something where it's like, wait, why do these two hang out together? He is clearly evil. No, he is clearly evil. The movie goes out of its way to show us that. But Obadiah is still a friend of Tony. There's a couple scenes, like at the very beginning, where he accepts the award on Tony's behalf. It endears us as the audience to him. Yes, I knew he was evil, but it still makes me like him because it's like, oh, he's helping Tony out of a jam. Or he brings pizza to Tony and they have that little banter where it's like, here, take some pizza. No. Take some pizza. No. And it's funny and it works really, really well. And it makes his twist at the end, or not necessarily twist, but his villainy that much harder for our characters. And I think it works good. Next, let's move on to our titular character, Tony Stark, Iron Man. And man, oh man, does this movie kill it with this character. He is so cool and so fun and so likable. But That being said, I should acknowledge that it's kind of hard to make this guy likable because he does do so many things that are unlikable. He takes advantage of women. He mouths off to a lot of people. He doesn't show up to awards. He's not very grateful. It's just, there's a lot to dislike about this guy, and yet he is likable. And I think that's because they wrote his character in such a way, and he was acting in such a way where you clearly saw that there was a heart of gold at the center of this kind of dark guy. And we have that scene where he gets captured, and we see him brought to his lowest point, and we see his true character thrive in the cave. This is a guy that is actually nice, that actually cares about his friends and cares about his life. And more than anything else, we see that he's legitimately smart. He's not just riding off the coattails of other people. He is a genius, and he can figure his way out of a situation, and it works so well. But when he comes back from the cave, it's not like it's a complete reset. He still jokes, he's still sarcastic, he's still funny, but now he's on a mission to try and fix all of his mistakes, to try and right his wrongs. And I really appreciate that, and it makes me like the character more because now we know that he is taking responsibility. He is owning up to his mistakes, and that's really cool. On top of all that, his life just seems cool and glamorous. Having all those cool sports cars, having awesome technology, being able to fly, we cheer with him when he flies. We cheer with him when he drives a cool sports car because it is stuff that is fun that we would all like to do. And I think that's awesome. Last character I want to talk about is Yinsen. And Yinsen is the emotional heart of this movie. He helps Tony realize that because Tony has taken a backseat to his company and hasn't cared and just enjoyed the fame and the fortune and everything, he has allowed his company, or his weapons rather, to fall into the wrong hands and to cause a lot of problems. And this sets Tony on a path to take responsibility for himself, which is great. On top of all that, Yinsen sacrifices himself for Tony. He sacrifices his life so that Tony can live and be better. I think it's so cool that Yinsen kind of realizes that Tony can do more good than he can. And that is just tragic and sad. It makes me love Yinsen so much more. And it's astounding to me that without Yinsen's sacrifice, Tony Stark wouldn't be alive. And so the MCU really has a lot to thank with Yinsen, which is just cool. Moving on, let's talk about the plot. And this movie was paced very well. There was action when there needed to be action. There was heart and humor when there needed to be heart and humor. And there was never a boring scene. Right from the outset of this movie, I was hooked. Speaking of which, the beginning of this film, starting with the attack on the military transport, was genius because it creates this air of mystery surrounding the next third of the film when we see this flashback of Tony's previous life. But that flashback is still important because we get to understand who Tony was, making his change in the cave that much more significant because now we know how far the cave has affected him and how much that has affected him. And I think that's just fantastic. He gets back from the cave and the plot slows down a little bit. You're like, okay, what's the next goal? He builds the Mark II, but it's clearly more than a match to take down the terrorists, so what's next? But then we see that Obadiah is the true enemy, and Obadiah is able to create his own suit and use it against Tony, and it's evil and it's fantastic, and there's a really fun battle, and I love it. It's so fun. On top of all that, I think it's really fun that they showed Iron Man's suit going up against fighter jets and seeing kind of what the Iron Man suit could do next to the closest modern military equivalent of the fighter jets. And I think that was really fun. So overall, I think the plot works really well from this film. It is really entertaining. The only problem I've seen people take with the plot is the fact that Obadiah seems to understand his suit perfectly right from the get-go, whereas Iron Man, it took him like most of the movie to figure it out. That being said, I think that's a little unfair. For one, Tony understood the Mark I pretty well, having only worn it ever once, you know? And more than that, Tony really just trained to get the flight down. Once he got the flight down, his suit kind of handled all the rest. It targeted the missiles from his shoulders and from his little wrist gauntlet, and firing little laser blasts from your hands isn't that hard to learn. You just point and shoot. It works. On top of all that, there's the fact that Obadiah does make mistakes. He doesn't understand his suit perfectly. He's clumsy in the suit. He makes mistakes. That's why Pepper's able to survive so long. And it partially explains why Tony was able to survive so long, even though he had a less advanced suit with a less advanced arc reactor. And I think that still works really well. So I love the final battle. My problem with it is less from a story standpoint and more just as an audience member, because I don't like seeing my character lose an unfair fight. He's using an arc reactor that wasn't built for the suit, and it doesn't work, and it's sad. That being said, I do understand why they chose to go with that, because they had to stack our character up against impossible odds. Not only is he fighting a guy in a bigger, more powerful suit, he's also is on a timer. He only has so much power, and he's using a less advanced arc reactor. So I think it works. I think it's fun. I love the plot of this film. It definitely is a big reason why I enjoyed this movie so much. Moving on to the setting. This is the third pillar of good films, and it's another one where this movie knocks it out of the park. The setting really helps the storytelling in this film. Firstly, we start with the terraced cave, which is appropriately scary and dark and intimidating and stuff. Then we move on to Tony's life and his mansion that's built into the side of a cliff and is glamorous and beautiful, and just anyone would want to live there. And then you have the workshop that Tony works in, which is just advanced. It's got all the technology, all the tools, all the gadgets. I 100% believe that Iron Man could build an Iron Man suit in that workshop, and I love that. And there's the cool hologram technology, and it's a really fun setting. Speaking of which, the technology of this movie is really fun. The hologram schematics are awesome and a really fun way to prototype ideas. The heads-up display in Iron Man's suit is really engaging and fun, and a really good way to get the actor's emotions, but while still having him wear this faceplate and stuff. I think that works great. And then you have the arc reactor. And I think one of the greatest things about this movie is that there's only one real significant bit of science fiction you have to believe, and that is the arc reactor. Outside of that, I honestly can suspend my disbelief and believe that everything else is possible. You could have this tough armor, you could have powerful enough motors, and all little gadgets could fit in there. I know in reality that probably couldn't happen. You probably couldn't have all of that stuff in there, but I believe a lot of it could happen. And if you get past the arc reactor, if you believe there's this fictional power source that could be miniaturized, then the rest of the movie makes sense. And I think that's the reason this movie is so approachable by so many people, because you don't have to believe in gods and magic and monsters and stuff like a lot of the MCU goes on to do. You just have to believe, hey, there's this cool technology, there's an arc reactor. If you believe that, the rest of the movie makes sense. And I love that they stick with that and they keep their focus on that. It's wonderful. All right, to finish off this review, I want to talk about some of the scenes that stood out to me. First and foremost, there is the flying. Anytime he's in his suit flying around, it is exciting, it is engaging, and it's immersive. It makes me, as the audience member, feel like I'm right there with Tony, joining in the excitement and joy that he has with flying around and doing all that fun stuff. And something that really helps that immersive feeling is the musical score that's played on top of it. I don't have the musical ability to describe what is happening, but I just know it's fun and it pumps me up. I really like the flying theme that goes along with him in this film. But outside of the flying, also we have the building montages. Anytime he's building, whether in the cave or at home in his workshop, it's fun, it's engaging, and it's very rewarding as an audience member, because you get to see him build a little part of the suit, and then we get to see that little part be incorporated into the overall suit, and we as an audience member get to say, hey, I saw him build that, and it works so well. And I know I might be alone in that just because I'm an engineer, but I think the building montages are a really key part of Iron Man's success and something that I enjoy in future Iron Man films. Lastly, I want to end how the movie ended, and that was with I am Iron Man. And I love this scene. I feel like it completes Tony's arc. He is a different person. He has changed. He is taking responsibility for the wrongdoings of his company, but at the same time, he's still that charismatic, cocky, arrogant dude who wants the fame and attention of being a superhero. And I think that just works so well. And more than anything else, it showed a shift in the superhero formula where the MCU doesn't care about secret identities. It doesn't care about the typical superhero stuff. It's focused on telling fun stories with fun characters. And I really like that and really appreciate that. In conclusion, this film is a really good film, in my opinion. For my three pillars, character, plot, and setting, it just does such a good job in all areas. It doesn't matter whether you're a side character, the villain, or Tony Stark himself. Each character is given the right amount of time and love, and I like that a lot. On top of that, you have a fun plot that, as I've said many times, is paced very well. There is not a useless scene in this film. It all serves to push the plot along and to move the movie along, and I think that works really, really well. Wrap both of those things up in a beautiful setting that is stunning and impressive and makes me want to live in this world, and you have a good movie. And that's what Iron Man 1 is. It's a fantastic film that not only marked a change in superhero storytelling, but also marked the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU as we know it. And that is just fantastic. It cannot get enough praise, and that is what I have to say about this film.